starring Mark Clennon and based on the experience of director, writer, and editor M.H. Murray. In this theatrical release, we experience the aftermath of a man, specifically a gay man, being assaulted. So, to summarize the film, Benjamin has just not too long ago broken up with his ex, and despite that issue and all the feelings that caused, his life is in a bit of an upswing. He just finished the tour with his ex, and that left him with a decent amount of money, even enough to send home to Jamaica, and he has a date with a nice guy named Malcolm, and even a gig soon where he'll not only be front and center to a some point on his own, but also he gets to perform this with the saxophone again, which is something he hasn't done in a while. However, as he has some complications with Malcolm after their first date, this leads him to go out, drink, and unfortunately, on his way home, he gets assaulted. And with that happening, we see the less than stellar side of the Canadian healthcare system, and also Benjamin trying to process how something less than 10 minutes may have a drastic altering effect on the rest of his life. So let me begin by saying, despite what Benjamin goes through, there are moments of levity in this film, which make it so it's not just doom and gloom for an hour and 43 minutes. We watch as Benjamin has a nice dinner with his friend named Agnes, even if it is ultimately to ask for money. Ariel, who is one of his best friends, she's this jovial type who kind of tries to get him liven up, make sure he has people around him that are safe for him to be himself or even rediscover himself. And I'm not going to pretend like this movie won't be triggering for some people, especially if you're going through something similar to Benjamin, but it reminds you that a moment in life doesn't have to define the rest of your life, and that you don't have to let someone swiping away your safety, your joy for however long the unfortunate incident lasts, get stretched out for months, years, decades, etc. You have to find or refine the joy that kept you going before that situation happened. With that said, you do have to acknowledge the highs and lows of random hookups when it comes to this movie. For it's no lie, casual sex can be thrilling. It's a stranger who desires you, wants to explore your body, but there's always a dangerous element to it. Whether heterosexual, homosexual, or just two people in general, you don't know this person. You don't know their status. And while things can start off hot and consensual, it can take a turn at any moment, since you are hoping and assuming this person has the same desires as you to simply get off, but that's not always the case. And this leads to a situation that may go from setting your soul on fire because of the passion to potentially triggering your fight, flight, or else freeze response. And what makes I Don't Know Who You Are all the more impactful is because for many people who like or love men, how you find or satiate your lust is through apps, websites, most of which don't have the same protections or walls that heterosexual focused apps have. You have profiles where anybody can contact anybody. There's always people who are download, trade, whatever you want to call them, who exist, who don't want to show their faces, who can be married, who knows what. There's a lot of secrets, which, yes, adds on to the hotness of the encounter for some people, but also exponentially heightens the danger of it. So, like Benjamin, you can think with a sudden encounter, you may meet somebody who boosts your ego, makes you feel desirable, and then just be hit with the realization that it has nothing to do with you. You were just available, you was there either willingly or unwillingly, and because of that, things happen. Hopefully things happen in a way that made you have a good experience, but there's always a possibility of being a bad experience, as Benjamin did. Which leads to the last high, and that's just understanding that the Canadian healthcare system, even though it's better than not having socialized medicine, at the same time, it is not perfect. For in a post-screen Q&A that the writer, director, and editor had, they broke down how some of the things that Benjamin went through is what they went through. And one of the complications was not only getting the medication to prevent the development of HIV, but also just the issue of one hand not talking to the other. So the hospital's not talking with the police, not talking to the pharmacist. So with that, on top of having to learn that your drugs may not be covered, you also have to keep explaining what happened to somebody over and over again. And as a lot of people have ever went through something like Benjamin can tell you, one time is hard enough with somebody you trust or know. Telling strangers the story while they are supposed to keep a straight face and they're not supposed to like embrace you or show their humanity to you, it makes it all the more harder to come out with something that is traumatic. And so hearing about the blind spots of the Canadian health system, especially which may be geared towards certain individual groups, it adds a whole new layer to what it means to be somebody who isn't, what's the way to put it, isn't heteronormative, for lack of a better way of putting it, and thus when it comes to the system in multiple ways, you're not thought of in terms of who needs help. Which leads it on the fence topic, and that's just, I Don't Know Who You Are is an indie movie, and unfortunately, like a lot of indie movies, it decides to get artsy when it doesn't necessarily need to. And to give it some grace, with the topic that it's dealing with, sometimes the film needs to take a beat to give its audience and its characters a moment. So when it comes to stuff like Benjamin cleaning his apartment after being assaulted, it makes sense. He needs time, he needs to process. But then showing him later on in the movie just drunk in the park, it feels like padding to keep this film from being too short from being considered a full-length film, since at least based off our conversation with, I can't remember the director's name, but I put him at the bottom, it seems that for a lot of film festivals and maybe the industry in general, there's still some type of prejudice against a movie being anything less than an hour and 30 minutes. And in many ways, you can easily imagine this film cutting off a good amount of time and just getting to the point in some cases. But overall, while I Don't Know Who You Are has beats that can make the pacing crawl, there is no denying that an experience you are supposed to understand and perhaps feel is conveyed very well.